If your perennial garden looked incredible in May and June, but lately it just feels off, a little less colorful, a little more droopy, a little more meh than it was a few weeks ago, I need you to hear this. It's not dying, and it's not your fault, but it is trying to tell you something, and almost nobody is listening. Here's the uncomfortable truth. Right now, in early July, your perennial garden is standing at a fork in the road. One path leads to a yard that stays full, colorful, and healthy all the way through September and October. The other path leads to exactly what you're probably starting to notice. Already, flopping stems, fading color, and a garden that quietly gives up by the middle of August. And the wild part? Most gardeners never even realize they're at this fork. They assume the hard part of gardening happened back in spring, and that from here on, the plants just take care of themselves. They don't. And in the next few minutes, I'm going to show you exactly what your garden needs right now, in plain, simple language with zero guesswork. No special tools, no big budget, just a handful of small, deliberate moves that make an enormous difference. By the end of this video, you're going to know exactly what your perennial garden needs during this specific 2 to 3 week window in July, and just as importantly, what it doesn't need, so you're not wasting time or money on the wrong things. You'll learn how to get your plants to bloom a second time, instead of just fading out for the season. You'll learn the one fertilizer mistake that quietly kills flowers while making the plant look perfectly healthy. You'll learn why your watering routine might be working against you, even if you're doing it every single day. And you'll learn a simple weekly habit that catches problems, while they're still tiny and easy to fix. None of this requires experience. None of it requires strength or special equipment. This is smart, effortless gardening, the kind where a little bit of the right knowledge replaces a whole lot of unnecessary work. If you've ever felt like gardening advice online is either way too complicated or way too vague, you're not alone. Half the articles out there tell you to just deadhead your flowers and call it a day. The other half throws so much technical information at you that you close the tab, feeling more confused than when you started. That's exactly the gap this channel exists to fill. Here on The Root Garden, the whole idea is simple. Gardening should feel calm, doable, and genuinely enjoyable, not like a chore you're constantly falling behind on. Whether you're just getting started, or you've gardened for years but never quite understood why certain things work, this channel breaks it down in plain language, one small, practical step at a time. You don't need a green thumb you were born with. You need the right information at the right moment. And that's exactly what today's video is about. Before we get into the full list, I want to flag one tip that's coming up later, because it's the one thing almost every beginner gets backwards, and it might be the single biggest reason your blooms have been thinning out this summer. It involves fertilizer. Specifically, it involves the exact same fertilizer that helped your garden earlier in the season, quietly working against you right now. Stick around, because once you see this one, you'll probably recognize it as something you've been doing without realizing it. We'll get there in just a minute, but first, let's start with the easiest win on this entire list, and one you can act on today. Tip 1. Deadhead with a purpose, not just for tidiness. Here's something that might surprise you. Most people deadhead their flowers. Completely wrong. And it has nothing to do with effort. It's about where you cut. The mistake: snipping just the dead flower off the very top of the stem and calling it done. The benefit of doing it properly: your plant produces noticeably more new blooms, faster, instead of wasting energy on a flower that's already finished. Here's why it works. A flower's whole purpose, from the plant's point of view, is to get pollinated and produce seed. Once a bloom fades, the plant keeps feeding energy up that stem trying to finish that job. If you only remove the flower head, that instinct barely gets interrupted at all. The plant is still stuck, trying to finish something that's already over. Picture your coneflowers or catmint 2 weeks from now. Instead of a few stray, tired-looking blooms, you've got a fresh new wave of flowers pushing through, because the plant finally got the signal to try again. The simple action step: follow the finished stem down past the dead flower until you reach the first healthy side shoot or leaf node, and cut there instead of at the top. That one adjustment redirects the plant's energy, almost immediately toward new growth. Tip 2. Force a second bloom out of plants you thought were done. Pattern interrupt. What if I told you some of your one-and-done bloomers aren't actually finished? They're just waiting for permission? The tip: certain perennials, like salvia, catmint, and delphinium, will throw out an entirely second round of flowers. If you cut them back hard, the moment their first flush fades. The benefit: instead of a single short burst of color in early summer, you get a genuine second wave later in the season, for free, with no new plants and no extra spending. Why it works: the moment blooming stops, the plant's stored energy is essentially up for grabs. If you cut back right then, that energy gets redirected into fresh new growth instead of being wasted on old, spent stems trying to finish producing seed. Picture this: if instead of a bare, tired-looking patch where your salvia used to bloom, you've got an entirely new round of spikes showing up in 4 to 6 weeks, right when the rest of the garden is starting to slow down. The action step: as soon as the first flush finishes, cut the plant back by about 2/3. Don't wait until it looks bad. Cut the moment it's done blooming. Okay, quick pause, because if you're only planning to do one thing from this video, what's coming up next might be the most valuable one on the entire list. It's the tip that decides whether your garden's blooming. Power actually grows year over year, or quietly shrinks without you ever noticing why. Let's get into it. Tip 3. Divide the clumps that have quietly stopped blooming. Here's a fact that surprises almost everyone the first time they hear it. An overcrowded perennial clump doesn't just look a little tired, it actually stops blooming as much as it used to. Full stop. The tip: divide clumps that have outgrown their space right now, before the hottest part of summer arrives. The benefit: more blooms, healthier plants, and, this is the fun part, completely free new plants for other parts of your yard. Why it works: once a clump gets overcrowded, the center of the plant starts to die back, and the plant shifts its energy to the outer edge instead of producing flowers. Dividing it gives every section room to rebuild a strong root system and start blooming at full capacity again. Picture a day lily or coneflower clump that's been looking a little sparse in the middle. After dividing it, you've got 2 or 3 healthy, full plants instead of one struggling one, and by next season, each one is blooming better than the original clump ever did. The action step: water the plant deeply the day before dividing it. Dig up the whole clump. Split it into sections that each have a healthy crown and solid roots attached. Replant immediately, water thoroughly, and mulch around the new divisions. Now here's a mistake I see constantly, and it's an easy one to fall into: watering your garden a little bit every single day because it feels responsible and consistent. It's not. Light daily watering only soaks the very top inch or two of soil, which is exactly where the roots of an established perennial aren't. Mature roots reach 6 to 18 inches down. Watering shallowly keeps those roots stuck near the surface, right where they're most exposed to heat and stress, instead of encouraging them to grow deeper into cooler, more stable soil. The fix is almost embarrassingly simple: water less often, but water deeper. Aim for about 1 inch of water per week, split across 2 long, slow soakings instead of daily sprinkles, and always water in the morning, so any moisture on the leaves has time to dry before evening, which helps prevent fungal problems. Tip 4. Feed for flowers, not just green leaves. This is the tip I teased earlier, and it's the one that trips up more gardeners than almost anything else on this list. The mistake: reaching for a regular, all-purpose fertilizer. During this stretch of summer, the same one that worked great earlier in the season, the benefit of switching: noticeably more blooms without doing any extra work. Why it works: most all-purpose fertilizers are high in nitrogen, which is exactly what a plant needs early on to build leaves and stems. But right now, your plant's priorities have shifted toward flowering, and heavy nitrogen at this stage pushes the plant to keep producing leafy, green growth instead, at the direct expense of blooms. The plant ends up looking full and healthy. It's just not flowering the way it should. Picture the difference: a plant that looks lush and green, but strangely light on flowers, versus a plant that's covered in blooms because its energy is finally going to the right place. The action step: from July through mid-August, switch to a fertilizer that's lower in nitrogen and higher in phosphorus. Check the numbers on the bag, and make sure the middle number is equal to or higher than the first. If you'd rather skip fertilizer altogether, Working 2 to 3 inches of finished compost into the soil does the same job, just more gently. Tip 5. Catch problems while they're still tiny. Pattern interrupt. The pests and diseases that ruin a perennial. Garden by August almost never show up suddenly. They're usually already there right now, just small enough that nobody notices. The tip: do a quick 5-minute walkthrough of your garden once a week. The benefit? Problems that would take weeks to fix later get solved in minutes right now. Why it works? Rising summer heat accelerates the spread of whatever pests or fungal spores are already present. A small aphid colony today can multiply into a real infestation within 2 to 3 weeks. Powdery mildew starts as a few faint gray patches on lower leaves. Catch it there, and it's simple to stop. Miss it, and it spreads across the entire plant. Picture the relief of a garden that never really has problems. Just small things you catch and handle in passing, instead of stressful outbreaks that take over an entire weekend to fix. The action step: once a week, walk your beds and flip a few leaves over to check the undersides, where pests and fungal spores almost always show up first. If you spot something small, a diluted hydrogen peroxide spray or a firm blast of water from the hose usually handles it completely. Now here's the one tip that ties this entire video together, and it might be the most overlooked task in all of perennial gardening. If you grow mums, asters, or sedum, this next task has an actual deadline attached to it. And if you miss the window, there's no fixing it until next year. These plants rely on one final pinch or light trim in early July to stay compact and branch out into the full, bushy, flower-covered shape you actually want to see in September and October. Miss this window, and instead of that beautiful rounded mound covered in blooms, you end up with tall, floppy, sparse stems that flop right over after the first fall rain. Here's why this matters so much. Pinching triggers the plant to put out multiple new side stems, instead of just one tall central stalk. Each of those side stems eventually produces its own flowers. Skip the pinch, and the plant puts all its energy into one long stem, weaker, taller, and far more likely to topple over the moment it's covered in heavy blooms. The transformation here is genuinely dramatic. Picture 2 identical mums planted side by side. The one that got pinched on time becomes a tight, rounded, fully covered mound of flowers, the kind you'd see in a professionally maintained garden. The one that didn't becomes tall, leggy, and sparse, with flowers only at the very top, and it usually ends up flopped over in the dirt after the first strong wind or rain. The action step is simple. Pinch back the top 2 to 3 inches of each stem, or shear the whole plant back by about a third if it's still growing vigorously. Most experienced gardeners treat the beginning of July as the practical cutoff for this task in most climates. So if you're watching this now, you're right at the edge of that window, not past it. This is the task that quietly separates gardens that look stunning all through fall from gardens that fizzle out early, and it takes about 2 minutes per plant. Here's everything we covered today in one simple list. Deadhead down to the next living bud, not just the flower head. Cut back repeat bloomers like salvia and catmint, hard right after their first flush to trigger a second round. Divide any clump that stopped blooming as heavily as it used to. Water deeply twice a week instead of lightly every day. Switch to a low-nitrogen, phosphorus-focused feed, or simply add compost. Do a 5-minute pest check once a week. And pinch back your mums, asters, and sedum before the window closes. None of this requires a big weekend project, special tools, or years of experience. Realistically, this entire list takes 2 to 3 hours total, and you can easily spread that across a few short evenings, instead of one long session. That's really the whole philosophy behind this channel. Gardening doesn't have to be complicated to work. It just has to be the right small actions, done at the right time. A little bit of the right knowledge genuinely does replace a whole lot of unnecessary effort. If you found this helpful, hit subscribe so you don't miss next week's video, and drop a comment letting me know which of these tasks you're tackling this weekend. I read every single one, and it genuinely shapes what we cover next. Your perennial garden absolutely can look incredible all the way through fall. It just needs a few small, deliberate moves right now, while there's still time for them to matter.